Hi and welcome. Today I talk with Kelvyn and Hannah from Counterspin Media New Zealand about their recent arrests. Hear how the New Zealand government's threat of a total of 42 years imprisonment and $600,000 in fines is only serving to motivate these courageous people to stand even stronger. In their own words, they will not be silenced. It turns out that this whole awful event may actually be an opportunity to expose some of our government's most atrocious crimes against humanity. I'll also provide an update on my last article where I ask questions pertaining to controlled opposition. And I'll answer the question of who is this Bishop Eddie Long that I spoke of? Who's the spiritual father and mentor of the founder of the Freedom and Rights Coalition, Brian Tamaki?
You are not a man, you are a monster.
Hi, I'm here with Kelvyn and Hannah from Counterspin Media New Zealand. So nice to have you guys here and be able to talk with you today.
Pleasure.
Thanks for having us on.
I was hoping we could have a little bit of a chat about what happened to you a couple of weeks ago now, 25th of August, is that right?
Yeah, so on the 25th, I think it was maybe around 12:30, 1 o'clock, Kelvyn and I were just working in our room, and we heard kind of a knock on the door or just some banging, and Kelvyn went to see what it was. And he took his time, and then I heard him call my name, so I was like, oh, okay, I wonder what's going on. And yeah, I can feel my heart racing just recounting this. But yeah, and then I walked out of our room, and there in the corridor were, from memory, 3 police officers, or maybe 2 to start with, and then it took 3 of them to basically get me on the ground and wrestle my cell phones off me, because I had no idea what was going on. And Kelvyn had just, like I said, called me, and then I just saw all these officers swarming in. And they ended up putting me in handcuffs and telling me they had a search warrant. And I was just blown away, I suppose. I don't know what else to say.
Hannah, why did they feel the need to throw you on the ground? Were you throwing punches or something?
Because I didn't want to give them my cell phones, because I didn't really know what was going on. Like, they didn't at that point, they didn't read me my rights. They didn't explain anything to me. They didn't have the search warrant on them. I asked to see it. They couldn't show it to me. It was 3 male officers. I said, where are your female officers? Like, why are you doing this to me? Like, I want to be dealing with female officers. This isn't okay. So they said, oh, the female officers are coming. They're coming. And then they said, oh, the search warrant's coming. It's coming. And so all of this was like happened so fast, and they didn't have all the information there for me. So naturally, I didn't want to hand over my rights when I didn't know what was going on. And then so then they slowly over time finally got, Kelvyn was outside. I couldn't see where Kelvyn was. I wasn't able to communicate with him. They separated
I was a little
us.
occupied and surrounded at that time.
And then in the end, they finally brought the search warrant, and this is by then I was in handcuffs, and at that point, we had cited journalistic privilege, and they commenced the theft, I guess you could say, of all our equipment, our electronic equipment, and our devices. And it was I don't know, what else can you say about it, Kelvyn?
You can call it theft, not only when
Absolutely.
because usually you got a right to be where they're searching. Well, there was no right granted in this case. When they took us away, they'd also, the security cameras that are within this place, they damaged, and they'd taken some down. They'd turned others around, so they couldn't see so obviously what they were doing wasn't being recorded. Exactly. So we don't know.
Security cameras they had turned around.
The building security cameras, for where we're staying.
Inside the building.
Yeah.
The internal ones.
They took some down and turned others around.
Wow.
So obviously they couldn't be
That's
seen.
reminiscent of Melbourne, when they turned all the CCTV cameras off because they didn't want the public to see the police atrocities that were being committed. If they haven't got anything to hide, why would they do that?
Exactly. They use that line on us, They always say, have you got something to hide? I say, well, have you got something to look for?
Did they cuff you, Kelvyn?
No.
No, but they cuffed you, Hannah.
Yeah, and then
she went feral on them. That's why.
Well, I think I was all right. Like, it wasn't that bad, but I just wanted the information, and instead of giving me the information, they put me in handcuffs, and I just had to wait there while they brought me the paperwork to show me the basis for everything they had just done to me. I mean, I didn't know who they were. They could have been imposters. They could have been people posing as police officers.
Absolutely.
Like, how am I supposed to know? They
Exactly.
just stormed in. There was over 20 of them. You know, some of them
20.
were armed, and they had a whole forensic team. You know, and it was very, very shocking. And
It is. It's just intimidation overload.
yeah, and I didn't, you know, I don't even know what to say. So so then they showed me the paperwork. And Kelvyn came in and he was kind of like, well, what's she doing in handcuffs? And I was like, what? He's not in handcuffs. Yeah. So take my handcuffs off type thing. They'd actually put them on really tight to start with as well. So I had already had to ask them to loosen them up from memory. And then they took them off and then they basically just guarded me. Like, you know, I wasn't allowed to move really.
Actually, the female officers were probably worse.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't
So
give
often the way.
them the code to my mobile phones. Kelvyn didn't either. So I got charged with failure to comply with a search, failure to give over codes. And then, yeah, they took us to the police station in Christchurch.
Failure to acquiesce and give up all your rights and freedoms.
Exactly.
Yeah. And they took us in separate vehicles, you know, and then at that point, the police officer or the detective's trying to be all nice and, oh, have you ever been into a police station before? And trying to make conversation. And I just wasn't having a bar of it. They just act like nothing's just happened. Like your privacy's just been invaded. You know, I had to go in and get my shoes and put some clothes on because I only had long johns on and a top, but, you know, I needed to put some proper track pants on. And, you know, so it just all felt very invasive. And, you know, we don't know how long we've got disclosure now. We actually, you know, they have been keeping tabs on us for a while. And then they took us to, like I said, to the police station. We were separated. They kind of search you down. They already had patted me down outside our place where we're staying, and then eventually they basically told me that I would have to give DNA whether I wanted to or not, and that consisted of either saliva or blood, and I didn't agree with giving up my DNA.
And that's for all the common law people out there. When you're dealing with the bottom run of this ladder, know this: your common law shit won't work.
Yeah.
Proof was, I don't consent. We're going to take your shit anyway. That's exactly what happens.
Yeah, I didn't consent to them giving me or taking my DNA, and I didn't contract with them to do that. But apparently, if you're facing a custodial sentence, which we haven't been convicted of yet, we haven't been found guilty of it,
and we won't be. We're going to win this.
But that didn't matter. So because I didn't agree to either one, that basically defaults me to having to give blood. So they forced me into a medical room, and it just so happened they had a doctor there as well. And they literally forced me to sit down, and they wanted to get the blood out of my hands, like out of my fingers. So I just kept a tight fist, and then they tried to pry my fingers open and they couldn't do it. So then they basically just picked me up on each side, basically, and forced me over a bed.
Over a bed?
Yeah, like there was a bed in the room, you know, like in a doctor's room. It's like a surgical bed or whatever it is. And just forced me over that. So I was lying on like face down. And
there were 5 of them.
Yeah, there was about
were these all male or female?
There was a mixture. So there was definitely a male on the left side, and I know the female detective was standing over the right, and there was about 2 of them on each side, and then the doctor himself actually having to get the blood out of my finger. And then at that point, I was feeling pretty violated, and I got pretty upset.
Yeah.
And then because I was vocally displeased with what they were doing, a whole bunch of other police officers raced into the room. So at that point, there may have been 8 to 10 in there. And the police detective, she actually said to me, I said, I don't agree with this, and I'll be holding you guys accountable. And she's like, well, that's fine. I'm just doing my job.
Always
And
the same.
Yep.
And it took them a long time to get the blood out. And so they had my arms behind my back, and they were like squeezing it really tight, like just pushing it up to like put me into pain. And I was making this known. And at that point, I just felt like because she had said they're just doing their job and that's fine if I hold them accountable for that. I felt like, imagine if the government made a law that anybody facing a custodial sentence that ends up in police custody has to be, for example, vaccinated against the so-called COVID, or, you know, like had this experimental serum put into their body against their will, just because they're facing a potential custodial sentence. Like, would the police then go along with that? I mean, these were the thoughts that were going through my mind. And because they're right up against me, you know, there's no wriggle room, like that. They just put all their weight up on me, and like, and it just felt awful. And I just did not know, I didn't realize that this was actually apparently the law in New Zealand, because a lot of people since then have said to me, well, but I thought that was only if you're caught drink driving that you have to give like blood. Well, apparently not.
But it is usually done to you know, basically identify whether someone was actually involved with an offence, the giving of DNA, and we're talking about sharing a link.
And that's all it was. See, a lot of people think we shared the video. We didn't. We shared a link to a foreign website in the UK that was undertaking a documentary investigation into the incident at Christchurch. Now, for the record, Counterspin Media has been investigating this over time as well. The official narrative, we can tell you now, is bullshit. It does not make sense. It does not stack up. Neither do timelines, neither do other extra players that were never brought out into the public eye. This is government red false flag all over it. Now, remember, false flag
Kelvyn,
means...
you're talking about the mosque shooting.
Correct. Now, we're not saying... See, a false flag, a lot of people think a false flag means no one died. That's rubbish. A false flag means the people it's attributed to are the wrong people. I mean, there's three terrants. There's three terrants. What they've done inadvertently by charging us with this, which we're glad of, by the way, is they've now opened up the door for us to bring all the evidence we have into the public space. So everyone's going to see it anyway. And they're not going to close the door on this one. Now, we could kill the case right now with case law and all that. We could kill it right now, but we don't want it. We want to drag it out. We want the public to see in the full light of day the corruption of these parasites. And then once we're finished with this and we win it, because we will, we're then going to take them down on other things as well.
Right.
And we're not backing down.
Yeah.
So again, I just want to clarify on that point as well, because any life taken by another human being is a life that's basically been sacrificed. You know, anyone that's done harm and ultimately taken another person's life is wrong. That is never okay. Doesn't matter what race, religion, color, creed, age, gender, anything that you are. Someone taking your life, someone murdering you is wrong, and that is never acceptable. So people saying, oh, we don't care about the families that had their loved ones taken from them, that's just absolutely not true.
Because half of those people haven't spoken to the families that have asked us to look into it, because they know that the official story doesn't make sense.
The fact is, you're standing up for these people. You're actually wanting justice, and you're wanting the truth to be known about what actually happened to their loved ones. There's so many red flags, flashing red lights about this whole mosque shooting scenario. And one of the first things that sort of made me think was that heavy messaging that we received about, you will not talk about this, we will not talk about it, God forbid you ever view the footage or it's found on your computer, you know, it's all over for you at that point, sort of thing. That had me thinking, what's going on here? And then it just coincidentally happened to be on the eve of the most totalitarian takeover our country's ever seen.
And doesn't that remind you? And doesn't that remind you of the one source of truth? We shall be your one source of truth. Disregard everything else. What we're saying, like I said, is the official narrative is bogus. We aim to prove that. We can prove that, and we're going to prove that. And that will shine a light into the dark corners these people don't want you to see.
And it's about treating...
Sorry, Hannah.
It's about treating New Zealanders as adults and giving New Zealanders the choice to see the information for themselves and make up their own mind. Whether, you know, I mean, there's nothing stopping the government putting it behind an R18, you know, firewall or whatever. If they're that concerned, there is so much violent material out there already in the movies, and even, you know, for a long time, ISIS beheadings were available on YouTube.
Still are.
So, you know, I mean, it just seems very suspicious. And as soon as a government stops you from looking at prime evidence of any events, you've got to ask yourself why. And if they're just saying, oh, you know, it's to protect you, well, actually, you're all adults. You can choose yourself whether you look at it or not. Just like it was people's choice whether they clicked on a link or not. And we have not put any footage up of anything related to that event. So
exactly. All it does when they shut the doors and, you know, pull all the curtains and say you're not going to look in here is actually make them look guilty. And it makes you realize that they very well may be hiding something here. It becomes rather obvious at that point. And like you pointed out, Kelvyn, Brenton Tarrant, there is 3 of them, and conveniently he's housed in a specially designed isolation unit, so no one will actually ever lay real eyes on him. How convenient.
We'll be able to bring him to the stand and ask him questions.
Right. Yep.
Because it's all about, see, the government used this information and politicized it, and funny, in comes gun control legislation that they'd already had pre-written. They needed an event in order to be able to bring it out and have the public buy into it. The Hegelian got dialect, problem, reaction, solution.
Yeah.
They create the problem. Everyone goes, oh, save us. And the government goes, just so happens we have a one in the drawer here, ready to go. We're going to save you all. We're going to be in any state. And away they went. So they used this information. They politicized it. They used it for their own means, but then they shut off any other entity, person, group, organization from looking at that and saying, hang on a minute, let's just make sure this stacks up. Well, it doesn't stack up. We've been investigating it. And we are the real fourth estate, not the journalistic whores who have sold their souls to the devil. I'm talking, we're the ones who, like Nixon and Watergate, brought down by journalists, not by the police, not by the military, by journalists. A whole lot of government corruption exposed, pedophile rings exposed by journalists, real ones like us. And that's the voice they're trying to silence, and we are the only platform, really, that is the people's voice, and we'll stand for them no matter what.
That's right. Go get them. Even the way they just struck so instantly, you know, it's textbook psychological imprinting. You know, while people are still reeling in grief, they'll hand over their guns.
The manifesto will be able to be entered into the court record and then out to the public. So will the videos, and the manifesto shows a lefty fool and an eco-fascist. Nothing to do with far right or anything like that. So it's just another manipulation. It's just projection. They're trying to blame the people who have nothing to do with it as being the problem.
Yeah, projection. Absolutely, that's what it is. You know, nothing sticks quite like the slander of white supremacists, does it? You know, and this is a slander that's been propagated by our own government, a government that's funding Azov to kill their own people in Ukraine. So, yeah, this is projection at its worst. You know, you only have to look at the fact that Jacinda Ardern turned up on the Stephen Colbert show on the very same night of the Texas shootings with the same psychological tactics, you know, dressed in her pink flowery mummy outfit, saying things like, you know, I may be a prime minister, but first and foremost, I'm a mother, and I'm so sorry for what's happened to you here today. And by the way, you know what we did in my country when this happened? We took everyone's guns away, to a rapturous applause. It's shameless.
Well, Democrats are trying to do.
Yeah, because then Biden was actually basically asking her for advice. And so, again, she's been politicized and she's been held up as the saving grace. And that basically the rest of the world needs to listen to her because she's been so successful here in New Zealand of being kind and understanding and fighting for all the minority groups.
What were the journalists asking her, why have you got record homelessness? Why is your economy in tatters? Why is your suicide rate through the roof? Why is it that everyone's whole quality of life plummeted? Why are your ratings and that of your journalistic whores hit rock bottom? Ask yourself those questions. No one asked you these questions.
No.
Yeah.
I guess it's all just part of what happens to someone when you're actually over the target, you know, getting a bit too close to the truth. And obviously you guys were over the target when you shared that link.
Allegedly we shared the link. But here's another thing. That link was allegedly, and I understand it's still there, on the Telegram channel, Counterspin Media Telegram channel. They noticed it on the 23rd. It was brought to the chief censor's attention. On the 23rd or 24th, he made it objectionable. And then on the 25th, he signed it off. We have that in disclosure. And under their own act, they can't retrospectively do that unless they say, oh, but that led to information that was tied to what we've already made objectionable. No. You made the manifesto objectionable and you made the video objectionable. You did not make independent investigations objectionable.
That's right. We need to take that seriously, though, don't we? I mean, it's something that could happen to any of us. Basically, you share a link, and then after you share the link, it becomes officially deemed as objectionable. They obviously don't want anyone seeing this.
It's definitely, they are going all out to try and stop people from seeing this, and it really does make one wonder. We just want the truth. Like, the truth will out eventually, whether it comes through us or somebody else. I mean, that's the nature of the world that we live in. Like, they can only suppress the truth for so long, and it's just about people's right to information, and
we are 100% funded by the people, so we work for the people. We don't work for special interests, and we certainly don't work for government and their minions, and we are not going to be silenced, because to do that we'd be betraying the people, and it's never going to happen. And
we're not in it for the money. Anybody that says we're in it for the money and we're just grifters, it's like, I can think of a lot better ways to make money, and this is not a money making exercise.
No.
And it doesn't exactly, it's not like their book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, either.
No, it's not.
You get offside with a lot more people than you actually get onside.
Yeah, and they get seriously angry.
I just want to say a quick point, something that you said in regards to, the freedom movement versus the truth movement. And for us, that really resonated, because we are allowing the truth to dictate where we go. It's not about, we are loyal to our followers or our supporters. I mean, I don't like that word followers anyway, or just people that are interested in truth. Like, we have a duty to tell them the truth. And if we get something wrong, to rectify it and stay in the realm of facts and evidence. But if the truth makes us unpopular, well, so be it.
Yeah, it's not about us, is it? I mean, I'm glad you picked that up from the video, Hannah. That's what I was trying to say. You only have to look at this particular example and compare it with the arrest of Brian.
You certainly didn't get a phone call to say, hey, we're going to come pick up in the morning.
No.
We just have taken the stance that we're happy to be the tip of the spear and say the really uncomfortable things that a lot of people don't want to say, because it maybe reinforces the mainstream narrative of conspiracy theorist or crazy or whatever. And that's fine. We'll take those hits.
Good on you.
And hopefully it makes the path a little bit easier for others, because people before us have kind of cut out a path as well. I mean, we're not the first ones to do this. People have been speaking out for a long, long time, and we follow in the footsteps of giants before us. So or we all stand on the shoulder of giants, should I say. So we're just
now that you mentioned that, Ian Wishart's a great example. His article that you've referred to yourself from 2007, with the child sex abuse and trafficking situation, it went all the way up to the police commissioner and the head of SIFs, and involved doctors and lawyers and ministers, and all covered over by Jacinda's BFF, Helen Clark. They had videotape evidence, but still no charges. Yeah, it's people like him that have made it possible for us to revisit that now through their investigation. Yeah, and it's funny, actually, I've noticed lately, I've noticed him being portrayed as a quack in mainstream media. It's quite random. I saw an article in Stuff the other day, and they're just portraying him as a bit of a kook. And I guess that's probably because you have referred to that article yourself and pointed people in that direction.
Yeah, I didn't realize that, because we have been mentioning that a lot, and we mentioned it last year, and we just want to keep talking about it and getting people to look at that article, 2007.
I'll put the link up.
Yeah, great. Because
Awesome.
it's a very, like you say, detailed article, and he didn't even go into all the information that he's got. They left out a lot in regards to other places around the country. And funnily enough, in that same article, this is back in 2007, when I was, still in my kind of left-wing mentality, I had signed
a mentally challenged position.
I had signed a what's it called, like a petition to stop Islamophobia, and I think the whole thing was against Ian Wishart. And see, I didn't even really realize what I was doing. I mean, I don't believe in hatred towards any race, color, or creed based on that fact. I think everybody should be judged on the content of their character and based on their actions and, what they contribute to society. But it was just funny that was in that article as well, with my name on it. Sorry, not in the article, but in that same magazine. And when Nadine Porter did a hit piece on me recently, she did mention that I think.
Right.
Yeah, she mentioned that petition that I signed and Ian Wishart, and basically tried to discredit him again. And she didn't actually go and look at all the evidence that he was
Not
bringing
allowed
up in
to
that
again, probably.
article, in regards to a lot of the concerns he was being, or that were coming to him. So he came out and basically said to her, you need to go and look at all these links where I've got all the evidence for people's concerns. And he put that in the BFD this week as well. So yeah, just interesting.
BFD is actually a good. I like reading it.
Yeah, so it is interesting, like
great.
you say, to see
I'll put that link up
hit
too.
pieces being written about him now, because I was actually, my mind was conditioned to not even look at any of Ian Wishart's articles or his magazines back in 2007.
Right.
I was basically,
Interesting.
so Investigate magazine was basically in kind of left-wing circles, he was just basically discredited as right-wing, like far right, whatever, like that. He's just a racist,
White supremacist.
and now looking back, I really want to go through and read his whole back catalogue, because there's just so much fascinating stuff in there.
Yeah, and it's not like any of his stuff's a motive. It's just good old investigative journalism, which we don't see much of nowadays, They've just done such a good, thorough job of painting the truth as hate, and people who like to look into the truth or speak about the truth as haters. So basically, you're a hater to anyone who hates the truth is what it comes down to, really. It's just ridiculous. Speaking of ridiculous, I saw this article in Stuff, I think it was the 3rd of September, that targets you, Hannah, and basically just paints you as someone who can't think for yourself, as a submissive, says things like you're probably just heavily influenced by QAnon, which, look, since when do you hear words like probably in investigative journalism? But uses phrases like Hannah nodding along as her man speaks, as she has done for over a year now, trying very, very hard to emphasize that anti-feminist aspect and paint you as some sort of character that's just submissive, and it's certainly not who I saw outside the courtroom that day.
Because I'm right.
Well, yeah. Firstly, I have not been on camera with Kelvyn for a year, so there they go. That blows a hole in their narrative.
That's right. I had to convince her to come to this side of the. She was always in the background doing stuff. She was never on camera with me until I convinced her to finally step on this side. So, but why let the facts get in the way of a good story? Exactly.
No, there were no facts. Just trying to create a character out of you as some sort of submissive.
Should have been nice if she was a couple of times.
No, actually, you guys are a great team. She rounds your edges very nicely, I must say, Kelvyn.
Yeah, I'm a diamond in coal form still.
Oh, right.
A bit more pressure and I'll be shiny.
Well, more pressure. Well, don't lose the edges. The edges are great.
What they cannot come to terms with is that somebody was essentially a young person that went through their schooling system and then went to university and was, early 20s at that point, mid 20s, and actually carried on learning and carried on studying outside of the little posted stamp consensus that universities like to give you, because heaven forbid you dare want to study something outside of their curriculum or ask questions that don't fit into their little boxes. At university, I had been conditioned to dismiss because they were labelled far right or they were labelled racist, when actually they are anything but. It's more about the rights of the individual and the responsibilities of the individual, as opposed to the rights of the collective, and having a victim mindset and always being part of a minority, and the majority having to basically pander to the feelings of the minority, and that we need to change the whole of society to fit this minority group's feelings. And that is essentially what we're seeing on the far left. But what we've seen in the last 2 years is that the minority group who chose not to participate in this experimental gene therapy that they've called a vaccination, anyone who chose to be outside of what they were pushing, is the new minority, and they have been allowed to be excluded.
Yeah.
That has been basically state-sanctioned exclusion and state-sanctioned ridicule from the mainstream and the politicians, and not one single one of them coming to see them when they were protesting in Wellington earlier in the year. And so now the far left, who is supposedly the champion of minorities and the champion of small groups, has just dismissed a whole group of people and basically said, your rights don't matter, your feelings don't matter, we don't care about you because you're not following the herd, and they want you to be part of the collective. They don't want you to be an individual. And because I've broken free of that programming,
it's very dangerous.
They are now coming down on me and basically saying, like, what the hell happened to her? She's basically, just turned into some sort of extremist. And actually, it's so far from that.
It's actually a really good demonstration of how that whole far left mechanism is so often used. It's just a tool to shut people up and shut them down. Actually, seeing you mentioned the experimental gene therapy, I tend to call it a bioweapon myself, and I know I've heard you use that term too, because I don't believe we're in any kind of experiment. I think they know very well what they're doing, and they're not bumbling around in the dark, and we're not lab rats, and this is not an experiment. This is very much a highly orchestrated genocide, population reduction. Those are words that have come out of the mouths of guys like Schwab and Harari and Bill Gates. But I think it's still just a little bit much for most of us to process that this is actually murder on a global scale, either by death or infertility. One piece of evidence spoke pretty loudly to me right back at the start, and that was the criminalisation of ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, of course. Ivermectin, which received a Nobel Prize for its safety and efficacy in humans, and at a time that we needed saving more than any other time, apparently, it was criminalised. It's things like that that make you realise you're not dealing with a health crisis by any means. This is something far more sinister. Oh, Kelvyn, I hear you'd like to view the isolated SARS-CoV-2 virus. Doesn't sound like too much to us, does it?
Oh, you'd think if they're going to base the evisceration of a world economy on something as mythical as the unicorn that is SARS-CoV-2, then they better damn well have some evidence to back it up. So far, there's been over 120 Official Information Act requests put in. All of them have come back with, no, we don't have it. So even the CDC in America cannot provide it. And COVID-19 is just a brand name like Nike, Chanel No. 5, etc. that tells you what the symptoms are. Funny, they're the same symptoms as cold and flu. So all they've done is rebrand it, make people shit scared of what's natural anyway, that we all go through in a season, in an everyday season, and run for this jab and get told if you don't take it, we're going to exclude you from life. So a lot of people think we're anti-government. I'm anti-democidal government, absolutely. I'm definitely anti them.
Me too.
That we're anti-jab. Hell yes, I'm anti-jab. Because this particular jab is the thing that's actually killing people. It has killed people, and the carnage that we saw when we went around the country is it's massive. It is massive. And if these people in the ivory towers would actually step out for once and go out into the community, sit down with families who are suffering from this, then maybe they'll get a clue or find their heart. Because at the moment, their hearts are as black as obsidian. Absolutely.
And our all-cause mortality stats are up by higher than any other time.
Cannot hide that.
That's a coincidence. Australian Bureau of Statistics is reporting that they're up by about 18% this year for all-cause mortality. That's better than a lot of European countries, but it's all coincidence, apparently. This cold is just, so intolerable that we must do everything we can to prevent people from catching this. But adult sudden death syndrome and young people dying in droves is apparently quite acceptable. Not really something we need to talk about.
Sportsmen dropping dead on the field just happens to be one of those things, and they're blaming long COVID. I didn't even know where the hell short COVID is. What the hell is long COVID? And honestly, then refs blowing a whistle on the field. Whoop, all of a sudden people are getting heart attacks from that because they get startled. Hello.
Yeah.
And then common sense, logic, and reason has taken an exit stage left.
Yeah.
I mean, most people, the world is run by experts, right? People with university degrees. How is that working out for us? It's a damn mess. Most of those people have been educated enough to be stupid and cannot see for the wood for the trees. Simple as that. I mean, that's why you get, comments like Lux in that time when he was down at Pookie Pine. He said, it's really amazing. You know, a log goes in and wood comes out. Hello. But anyway,
Yeah.
I
He's
digress.
a special boy, that one,
But
isn't
yeah,
he?
I want to see the isolated virus. I want to see.
But they've only had 2 years, Kelvin. I mean, they might be able to create a revolutionary, world-saving, 100% effective vaccine in 2 months, but apparently they need at least a decade to isolate a coronavirus.
Have you noticed all of the issues have come around post-jab? All these variants post-jab.
Yeah.
Everything that's going wrong with people's health post-jab. And yet the public are not, a lot of the public are not catching on. They sit there like idiots in front of the TV and they gorge themselves 6 o'clock every evening and take the bullshit that's spun their way.
Deceived.
It's like Jacinta said herself, they're exposed to a sustained 2 weeks of propaganda when they're in the MIQ. So when they come out, they're good little minions propagating the same lie, like people in university. You get given information, and so long as you take it in and regurgitate it in a prescribed manner, of which is acceptable to them, they'll give you a degree and off you go. Spread the word. Yeah. Nothing ever gets changed outside, within the collective. Nothing. It always comes from the fringes. The people who think outside the box are the revolutionaries and the ones who actually change the direction.
And the truth exposes. You know, I guess that's why we see them all being shut down at the moment. Actually, in your line of work, Kelvin, you're probably familiar with that experiment back in the 60s, CIA. I can't remember the name of it, but basically they subjected people to a lie for 2 months. It was only 2 months, but it had lots of messages of fear attached to it and sounds like our COVID, you know, and colouring and patterns and stuff, you know, all that psychological stuff with messages of fear. And they exposed them to that for 2 months. And then after that 2 months, even though they revealed to them at that point that they'd just been part of a control group and it was an experiment and that none of it was actually true, they rejected it. Yeah, they rejected it.
Yeah, that was like they did that with the radio. What was that alien story that they
War
read
of the
out?
Worlds.
Yeah, War of the Worlds. I think that was part of a similar type of thing where they were experimenting like what people would believe. And I think a lot of people actually believed
about
that.
a worldwide invasion by aliens, and a lot of people actually believed it.
Or what's the experiment called where you know, someone was brought in to be the electrocutor and they had an actor playing the person who was getting electrocuted. And so long as the man in the white coat behind the test subject kept saying turn it up, turn it up, turn it up, regardless of how much pain they were putting the actor through, it showed that actually a high percentage of people would still just keep turning up that dial because of what the person in the lab coat said.
The perception of authority.
Yes. Yeah. I can't remember what that experiment's called, but it's a very famous one. I mean, there have been so many experiments done throughout history about what people
Stanford experiment, same thing.
About what people are willing to do, and that how propaganda, you know, Operation Mockingbird with the media, you know, this and there's so many like MK Ultra, so many declassified experiments that people can go back through now and actually look at what they've done. And like you're saying, fear. Just the repetition of a lie, telling a lie that's big enough. I mean, this stuff goes back to Goebbels. It's not new information. So if you have those people locked down, you know, people weren't allowed to see their families. They were literally isolated. They weren't allowed to feel like they were part of a contributing member to society. And, you know, lockdown and then a bit of release, then lockdown again, release again, lockdown, and this constant 1 o'clock podium of truth, and that constant bell that they had for your COVID-19 update.
And your phone going, national emergency. It's like, what's going on?
It's like ringing the bell for a meal.
Yeah, that's the Pavlovian dog experiment. I mean, they've done all of this stuff before. They know people will react to cues. I mean, that's like NLP. They do it through like language programming or, you know, colors. And that's these people,
massive teeth and hands going like this.
These people are master manipulators. They understand human psychology better than the average psychologist. In mainstream psychology, they don't even put all the information out. So, you know,
they haven't worked us out yet.
I mean, And what they
No one
can't
can
figure
do
out is
that.
a human X factor. All their algorithms and all their computer programming and everything cannot account for the human X factor. When a human being does something that is out of the ordinary, something that is not their pattern that they're normally doing. And this is why, we always encourage people, what are you here for? You have a purpose. You haven't just come here to consume and work and die. Like that is not your purpose. You have a much greater reason for being, and if you can tap into that, I mean, they can't control that because that is divine. That is, I don't know, then you start going into the spiritual aspect, but we're all here for a reason, and we're doing what we do. And I always say, you're not necessarily going to do what we do, but you've got a purpose and you've got a piece of the puzzle to play in this freedom movement and the truth movement.
And if you can only speak to one person, that one person is worthwhile. It's funny, actually, in that same experiment I mentioned, they did identify that there was a group that no matter what, they couldn't influence them, they couldn't manipulate them. But even so, obviously we're at that point now where we can provide bucket loads of evidence before these people and they still reject it. They just can't receive it anymore. Oh, Kelvyn, I hear you'd also like to see a copy of the unredacted Pfizer contract?
Absolutely. Yeah, we want to see the unredacted Pfizer contract, and that way people can see that the boosters were already in play before you started getting jabbed. It was already coming. We tried to tell people it's not going to stop at 2 jabs. There's going to be more because this is the plan. You are the hardware, and the jab will be the software upgrade every year that you're going to require. They're already pushing that narrative now. And you notice the message adjustment that's taken place. Before it was, if you take this jab, you cannot get it, you cannot pass it on, and you will not die. Now, well, all that shit's out the window. It's gone. Now it's message adjustment. Oh, yes, we are hearing that there's myocarditis here, maybe a bit of pericarditis, blah, blah, but it's only on the lower fringe. And everything else is attributed to either climate change or, sports referees' whistles or what else they got. They got
falling asleep in front of the TV will do it.
In front of the TV. Jeez, there should be a lot of heart attacks. Most of us shouldn't have been born because our parents used to do it all the time. Half the time they're half cut doing it.
I heard Kerry Chant actually a while ago, the Bloomfield lady for Australia. She said it plainly. She said, there'll never be a time that the jabs are gone. She said it plainly. This is a forever thing. It's her words. There have been some nations, though, very small ones, and not many, that have been successful in their bid to view the unredacted Pfizer contract. I'll read you a tiny little snippet from the indemnity clause of the Dominican Republic's unredacted Pfizer contract. Could possibly be why Jacinda's not too keen on us having a look at this. Well, one very small part of why she's not too keen. The appendix states that the Dominican Republic will indemnify, defend and hold harmless Pfizer, BioNTech and their affiliates from and against any and all suits, claims, actions, demands, losses, damages, liabilities, settlements, penalties, fines, costs and expenses, including attorneys' fees and other expenses of an investigation or litigation, arising out of, relating to or resulting from the vaccine, including but not limited to any stage of design, development, investigation, formulation, testing, clinical testing, manufacture, labeling, packaging, transport, storage, distribution, marketing, promotion, sale, purchase, licensing, donation, dispensing, prescribing, administration, provision or use of the vaccine. Wow, it's a very broad indemnity clause. Why do they feel the need to cover so many aspects there?
I've never seen anything like it.
I can destroy that in 2 seconds flat. You cannot get indemnity when you gain it by fraud. That whole thing, the whole safe and effective was fraud. They know it. The documents are out saying that exact same thing now. So that there just wastes their liability clause. Gone.
Okay, I'm just going to ask you plainly. Do you think we can ever hold these people to account in courts? I mean, the World Economic Forum is a corporation of gigantically powerful businesmen, and they control all the governments and even royalty, and likely the courts too, or whoever controls WEF, some satanic overlords like the Rothschilds or Rockefellers and the Vatican. But when you got people like King Charles parroting WEF slogans like "Build Back Better" and "Opportunity to Reset" and all that, when you got people like that bowing the knee to WEF, do we have a chance?
I just want to say one thing. For anybody that thinks that's a conspiracy theory or that that's not true, go to the Auckland City Council website.
Yep.
And from memory there, you will see the World Economic Forum policies that are influencing the New Zealand local government. And look at the United Nations sustainability goals.
It would say the fourth industrial revolution.
Yeah, the fourth industrial revolution.
Yeah.
This stuff is influencing policy at a local level in this country, not to mention like what you're saying, how they're all singing off the same song sheet. And this is absolutely a fact, and it's absolutely happening. And you just had to look at Event 201 that modeled basically this whole pandemic. There was also another whole kind of mapping system
towards spas.
Yeah, well, there was spas as well, and then another mapping
and
system.
Cyber Polygon for the cyber crash we're apparently going to have.
And they had mapped out the whole thing of what would happen under the pandemic, and on the World Economic Forum website, and you could go in and you could click on it, and then a whole nother spider's web would open, then click on it again. And that was a website that obviously had millions of dollars going into it. And I was looking at this back in March, April of 2020, and there was no way that they would have done that in 2 months from when the so-called pandemic had hit. And this is years in the making.
All the psychology was expended on this. They knew exactly what people would do, how they would react, how they would deal with dissenters, who they would trot out as experts to tell everyone to, what to do. And in answer to your question, absolutely, these guys have already had their time. They've already lost. We're just about to show them how badly they've lost. We are going to win this. They will be held to account. Yeah, and I guarantee you, this is just another domino that's about to fall. It's like a Jenga block. I'm just pulling out the right one, and they're coming down.
Yeah, and over in America, you've had the attack on Alex Jones and Steve Bannon, and they're doing this all around the world to anybody that's presenting a different set of facts or a different narrative compared to the mainstream narrative. And Steve Bannon was very strong too, wasn't he, yesterday in his walk into court when he kind of surrendered. He said that this is just a basically I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said this is a beast system in its death throes, and it's basically just trying its in its last dying breath to come down
carnage as they can.
Yeah, and I mean we are going to keep going. And I think Liz Gunn asked me to kind of bring it full circle to what you asked at the beginning. I think Liz Gunn asked me, what was I thinking, and kind of why do I do this? And I've always got in the back of my mind the commitment we have to the people and the commitment that we have to truth. And whatever they put us through, I knew all of this before I stepped into the public arena. I knew this would come because I'd been watching America and over in Europe and the UK for years before any of this stuff even hit New Zealand. Like, we are so late in the piece. So I didn't go into this with a naive mindset. I knew that if we were ever over the target, they would throw everything at us. And like I've said before, like I'm willing to go all the way. And I don't plan on losing this. Like Kelvyn says, we're planning on fighting this.
We've already won. We're just about to deconstruct them
and throwing everything at it that we can on behalf of the people, because it's not us that they're after. It's the people. They want to silence the people's voice. They want to make everybody scared. They want to make people afraid to actually speak up and stand up, because they'll take everything off you. They'll take your job. They'll take your reputation. They'll try and destroy you financially, or take you through the courts and put you in jail.
Or they'll have those walking comorbidities like Cena Brown come up from Dunedin with their little posse of confused, intellectually challenged minions, to then try to call us anti-Muslim. On the 21st, we'll have Muslim people standing there with us. So what are they going to say then if they reach for yet another ad hominem attack? Because we sort of deconstruct everyone they put towards us. I mean, looking at my family, you can hardly call me a white supremacist.
No. This whole thing, though, we have to remember, though, I suppose, that COVID's just one aspect of this. They're going to come at us from many different angles. You've got climate change, for example, which will reach a whole lot of people that the COVID narrative might not have been able to reach. And of course, we've got a whole lot of other things like digital banking, digital ID, and all that kind of thing. Can I ask you, what do you think we have to look forward to with the banking system and blockchain and all that kind of
Do
thing.
I know how it's going to play out? No. All I know is that I think it was on The Economist magazine, like way back when they were already, I think it was in the 80s or the early 90s, they were already talking about eventually cash will be gone, and, you know, there will be this kind of, and they had a picture of a phoenix rising from the ashes. And I don't think they called it Bitcoin at that point, but they were basically insinuating that this was coming.
At World Government Summit this year, they used the word blockchain. They said that's what was coming to us very soon, they said, which is, you know, a little scary because it's different from Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency. It's very much metered and dependent on your behavior.
And if your behavior doesn't match what the totalitarian bureaucratic system wants, then your credit card won't work, or your transactions won't go through. What's another thing? I mean, there's Project Bluebeam that people keep talking about. If you want to go and look at that, they will try and find some way to basically unify all the nations around the world to get rid of the nation state and create some sort of overarching one world government. I mean, you only need to look at all the clips where they put in New World Order. This is the New World Order, you know, all Bush and all the senior, Henry Kissinger, all these real movers and shakers of politics around the world have talked about this for so long, and people try and say it's a conspiracy, but yet you just need to look at the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberg Group, all these groups that are behind the United Nations and the World Economic Forum, that are controlling the direction of humanity. Like, it's either it's a great big conspiracy and there are a few people in dark rooms deciding things, or everything's just a coincidence and it's all just like magically happening. I don't know. People out there have to decide. What do you think, Kelvyn?
Well, most people are fucking stupid. Seriously. And most people are being educated enough to be stupid.
And it's people are very compliant, and people are very much, especially here in New Zealand, you know, that you see it with the masks. They don't want to challenge that system just because they don't want to make a fuss. And New Zealanders, we're very far down that track of compliance, and unfortunately that's what's happened in the West. They've made Westerners very compliant, and that's why you'll see this whole COVID rollout has really happened to Westerners on a massive scale.
Yeah, compliance and a dependence mentality and a reality, in a sense. I mean, they've worked very hard on making us dependent on them for all our basic needs, you know, owning everything in the world pretty much. And as long as they can make us dependent on them, you know, we can't farm and can't buy diesel and they or food, and they own the water resources and they destroy the food processing plants. I guess that's how they, you know, and many other things. That's how they probably think they're going to control us, you know. It's kind of got to the point really where they don't seem to care that we can see what they're doing. I like the way you put it on the phone the other day, Kelvyn. You said they're running naked towards the finish line.
Yeah, that's dark, because they don't care. They don't care if they're in plain sight. No, they don't care how much you see the treachery. They don't care how much you see the criminality. They are continuing unabated. So look within, get yourself sorted, and start moving on through your life without having to give your power away. And that's why we're in the situation we are. We've given that power away to governments, thinking that they're going to solve our problems for us. We give it away to teachers, to doctors, to trinkets on the wall, thinking all these things are going to map our lives for us. Doesn't happen. Pull your socks up, get your shit together, and get on with things. And if all you religious people want this changed, get out of your churches, roll up your sleeves, and do what you pray to have done. It'll change tomorrow. Until then, shut up.
And I just want to add one thing to that, and explain to some people why they are coming out in the open like this. You know, I know that time's running short, but we haven't even touched on the transgender agenda and the way they're trying to infiltrate the children and try and make it normal that just because you're confused as a teenager or a young child that you should go and get mutilated and you should go and take these drugs to suppress your natural development. Right. And, you know, we've got so many trans people now coming out and saying, you know, they're in tears, just like saying, don't do this, basically, and we wish we hadn't done it.
It's shortening their lives.
And I mean, the level of suicides amongst trans, even 10 years after they've had their operations and everything. Yeah.
Actually, did you see a documentary I put out a little while ago called The True Agenda?
No, I haven't seen that. We've seen What is a Woman.
That was so good.
It's great. This was called The True Agenda, and I go into the whole gender agenda, which is ultimately a paedophilia agenda, you know, with the minor attracted persons and all that. Oh, But that's another whole hour's discussion, isn't it?
Well,
but,
and that's where I was going. Like, I just wanted to say that they're putting this all out in the open now. They're defending stuff and justifying stuff that is absolutely abhorrent to a rational, sane individual who likes, a bit of order in society and likes the fact that when, families are strong, communities are strong, and society is strong, they are trying to destroy the family. And they're now trying to say that if you believe in the family, if you believe in motherhood and fatherhood, then you're some sort of white supremacist, which is just ridiculous. But
a homophobe.
But through the laws of nature and spirituality,
really?
They have to tell you what they are doing, so that from their point of view, they are not taking away your free will and your free agency.
God concept.
So they do this obviously through manipulation and deception. They try and tell you that the 6 o'clock news is fact and all the movies are fiction. But at this point in the game, you'll probably find more facts in the movies than you will on the 6 o'clock news, and you'll see their agenda fully mapped out because it's part of their universal belief system that they themselves believe in, that they have to tell you what they're doing, and it's your choice basically whether you pick up what they're putting down. And if you don't say no, then that's compliance.
Right. Yeah. I remember saying not long ago, a couple of years ago at least, probably now, but that there was a time coming soon that, basically if you called someone a pedophile or suggested even that, having sex with children might not be the right thing to do, that you'd be ostracized for that. And that time's already here. It's astonishing. But I guess that's how this whole normalization.
Love is love, don't you know, Samantha?
Oh, yeah.
Even children can enjoy sexual touch sometimes.
Oh, stop. It's hideous. It makes me so angry.
Parasites that need to be fumigated, surgically removed from society.
Yeah. It's just, anyway, I carry on with that. But, I guess that's just, it's how normalization works, Basically, what they're telling you is just so bad, but you're currently trying to process something they told you last week that was just terrible, and now suddenly what they told you last week doesn't seem quite so bad, and what they told you the week before, which was just terrible, is now almost acceptable. It's just incredible. Anyway, guys, we need to wrap up soon, and I'm aware that you guys had all your gear stolen and that kind of thing, and so I was wondering, even if you do get it back, right, it's going to be highly compromised. It's going to bugs.
Keyloggers will be on there. Bugs will be on there for sure.
Is there anything we can do to help, to help you get back on your feet and get some new gear, that kind of thing?
Yeah, if you just go to counterspinmedia.com, there's a donation button there. Different ways of doing that.
I'll put that link up on the screen too, Kelvyn.
Yeah. And we would, if anyone is able to, definitely don't do yourself a disservice and don't give anything that you can't. Would rather you be okay. We'll keep fighting regardless. And just remember, we're not giving up on you because you've never given up on us. Keep the faith, but ditch the institutionalized religion, because they folded like a bloody deck chair on the Titanic as soon as this whole mythical unicorn of a virus came out. And I promise you, we're going to win this.
Thank you so much, you guys.
You're most welcome.
Thanks for all your time and all your efforts. Much love to you.
Thanks for having us on.
And thanks for chatting with us today. Hopefully we'll see you again sometime.
Sounds good.
See you later. Okay, thanks so much for chatting. Bye.
See ya.
Well, thank you, Kelvyn and Hannah. That was great. There was one question I forgot to ask while I was on air, and that was just pertaining to Kelvyn and his involvement with Freemasonry. I did ask him on the phone the other day, and he told me that he had withdrawn himself from Freemasonry about a year ago now. Okay, so as I said earlier, I'm now going to give you an update on the response for my last article that I did, where I spoke about Brian Tamaki and the Freedom and Rights Coalition and Destiny Church. I spoke a couple of weeks ago now about what I considered to be red flags, that they're being used as a controlled opposition, pointing to specific reasons why I feel the way that I do. I also spoke about Brian Tamaki's connection with Bishop Eddie Long from Atlanta, who was sued for a sexual misconduct with several boys from his church, and in context with the reasons why I believe that that is all still very much relevant today. There's been no reply whatsoever from Brian Tamaki or Hannah Tamaki. Freedom and Rights Coalition replied only via a comment on the AFIPN page, where they said my video was full of lies. So I responded with, please tell me, where have I gone wrong? What do you consider to be lies, and what's the truth, please? But there's been no further response after that. And as my phone calls have not been responded to, I then went to Brian Tamaki's Facebook page and attempted to ask him a few questions there. The response to that was to instantly hide every comment that I made regarding these issues, not deleted so that I might realize they'd been deleted, so they'd still appear as posted to me. I watched through other people's profiles in my house, actually, how incredibly rapidly he would hide my comments. They wouldn't last more than a few seconds. And they were gone for them, but still visible to me. So then I tried Hannah Tamaki, and it was exactly the same story on her page. I also tried the Freedom and Rights Coalition Facebook page, and exactly the same thing happened there too. Absolute radio silence. So I asked, I PM'd a couple of my friends on Facebook and asked them to copy and paste my comments. And they did onto 2 or 3 threads, and they sent me screenshots of how it was posted and how it was visible to them, but again, they were hidden and not visible to anyone else. I then went on to have some more conversational chats with other Destiny people on those pages, and they always replied to my comments and questions with, a lot of vitriol, but also saying that none of this was true. And most were all actually were completely unaware, it seemed, of the Bishop Eddie Long situation. I also had some false profiles contact me through various social media platforms, people that were obviously affiliated with Destiny, lengthy tirades about how I'm a bitter Destiny ex, and of course the standard deflections of racism. But just to clarify, I left Destiny Church when the Bishop Long info came out about 12 years ago now. I haven't even thought about Destiny Church for many years, had no ill feelings towards them whatsoever, other than the fact that Eddie Long kept showing up at their church, and that bothered me. But I guess I kind of hoped that mainstream media might do something, because I was, pretty naive back then. But actually, as it says on this article here, Brian Tamaki always refused to comment on this particular subject, and nothing more was said. Then Eddie Long died in 2017, and I thought, well, maybe the threat was now gone, but I have since changed my mind on that. Anyway, just to recap on the situation with Eddie Long, I posted a video a week or 2 ago where I said that Eddie Long, who is Brian Tamaki's spiritual father and was welcomed at Destiny after the allegations were made, was sued by the families of many boys for sexual misconduct, some of which happened at Destiny Church in Auckland. I claimed that these boys were coerced into sex with Eddie Long by means of bribes and a misuse of his spiritual authority, which was a little bit of an understatement. Since then, the only response has been, this lady's video isn't true, from Freedom and Rights Coalition. So many Destiny followers told me this Eddie Long business never happened. Even though I showed them articles from New Zealand Herald stuff and many articles from overseas, I was always met with the same, but mainstream media lies. And of course they do, but this did happen. This is actually only one of the countless articles that covered these events.
Jamal Paris says he's now haunted by a father figure, Bishop Eddie Long, pastor of New Birth Missionary Baptist, one of America's most powerful megachurches.
I cannot get the sound of his voice out of my head, and I cannot forget the smell of his cologne, and I cannot forget the way that he made me cry many nights when I drove in his cars on the way home, not able to take enough showers to wipe the smell of him off of my body.
As teens, Paris and 3 other young men claim Long adopted them as his spiritual sons, then exploited them. Their civil suits allege Long used scripture, cars, jewelry, and trips on his private plane in a sexual seduction.
That's not a father. That's a predator.
Long built this megachurch into 25,000 members. 4 U.S. presidents attended Coretta Scott King's funeral here. He flaunts his wealth and his physique. His so-called muscular Christianity preaches homosexuality is sinful. Now these allegations.
I have never in my life portrayed myself as a perfect man.
But here's what makes many church members here wonder. Long has never taken his public denials one step further, never said flatly these allegations are false.
You are not a man, you are a monster.
Allegations that leave Long's congregation trying to decide whether their pastor is a predator. Mark Strassman, CBS News, Lithonia, Georgia.
You may ask, why am I concerned? You know, the guy's gone now. Well, I believe there are many good reasons why, and I'll run through a few of those reasons. The first is simply my concern about the fact that none of it was ever allowed to be talked about at all. Not then, and not now, never. Eddie Long also made covenants with his victims. You can see this for yourself online. Google Anthony Flagg or Spencer Legrand or Maurice Robinson. He's the one that was molested while attending Brian's Decade of Destiny conference here in New Zealand. And in these covenants, they had to promise before God that they would never leave Long and then accept and wear his ring with his name on it. One even reveals that he got Eddie Long's name tattooed on his wrist because they were lovers. Brian Tamaki also asks the exact same thing in his covenant ring ceremony. If you saw my last video, you'll have seen that it's like a flippin' marriage. And that concerns me. And then they're asked to wear his ring with his name on it for the rest of their lives. All Eddie Long's victims also described how they were groomed over many years and made to feel special, and that they had the title of spiritual son bestowed upon them. Brian Tamaki also calls his chosen ones spiritual sons. Remember how Heka, it was a couple of protests ago, from the stage at Parliament, referred to Brian Tamaki as his father. And many people said to me, oh, I didn't know Brian was his dad. And I had to explain what that actually meant. Eddie Long's spiritual sons then went on to describe how they were lavished with expensive gifts and cars and holidays and jewellery, etc. All with the promise of spiritual elevation. Brian Tamaki was also first recognised and elevated by Eddie Long. Brian Tamaki wears a big flashy ring that he says was given to him by his spiritual father, Eddie Long. The obvious parallels there concern me. Bishop Long's spiritual sons talked about how he used his spiritual authority to coerce them over the course of years into doing whatever he said. I've literally seen Brian Tamaki kneel at the feet of Eddie Long about 5 meters away from me before they both sat down on their literal thrones at the Decade of Destiny conference. And if you find it hard to believe that they actually sat on actual thrones, take a look at this. And keep in mind, this is a year or so after several boys and their families went public and sued in 2012.
311 years old, and I'm going to pull off the foreskin of this. We come there, we don't even touch it with our hand, we touch it with a finger, the authority of God, only given to one of great authority. 90% of Jews in the world have never even seen, came close, nor touched a scroll, because these are kept in arks behind eternal lights till meets. On behalf of the Jewish people, the land of Israel, and the God of Israel, I want to make a presentation. Praise God. Amen. Bishop, you will come. Praise God. Praise God. He is a king, seeing the original scroll, seeing the original letters. For those who speak against him will be considered least in the kingdom of God, least in the kingdom of earth. This is done in the kings of Israel. They surround him, raise it in the air. He had now wrap him in the scroll, real slow, real slow, real slow. He is sealed to come out with a new anointing. The kingship within him, the power within him is going to come out. It doesn't matter where you go. Now how you try to attack him, you can't attack him. He's sealed. He now is given the constitution of God as a king. 4 sons representing the 4 corners of the earth. They'll raise him up right now. He now is raised up from a commoner to a kingship. Come on! Come on, praise God. Praise God. Thank you, Yeshua. Praise God. Begin to pray in spirit. Come on, everybody sing it. Let's go. It's a new start. It's a new birth. 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 Come on.
exalted as king, wrapped in a Torah. So he went from pastor to bishop to apostle to king. Brian Tamaki's made it from pastor to bishop to apostle. Is it king next? I mean, that's what a self-declaration, you know, the one he said was from God back in 2003 said. It said, you know, the one I played in my last video, that he's going to rule and reign. I mean, ruling is like a political thing, I guess, but reigning, is that where he receives his kingship or something? I know how ridiculous it all sounds, but did you see that video? Is this the track that Destiny people really want to go down? Do they really want to be lifting him up on a throne? And the scary thing is that I know a lot of you will actually be saying, yes, absolutely, we'd be on it. That ceremony that you just watched there was in between the lawsuits and his next visit to Brian Tamaki. Yes, a year or so after multiple sexual abuse lawsuits, and they crown him king. Likely because they believe he was framed or whatever. But keep in mind the mentality that, you know, this man can do no wrong, which is very reminiscent of the culture at Destiny Church. And keep in mind, Eddie Long never flatly denied these allegations. He settled out of court, paying an undisclosed amount of money to every accuser under heavy no public speaking conditions. The only one that wouldn't speak publicly before the gag order was actually, you know, he wasn't from a rich family by any means, but he was seen being driven around in a limo on trips to and from a recording studio that he had the private use of and he could suddenly afford to use every day. He had expressed that he'd like to become a recording artist, and suddenly now his dream was coming true. This is the same one that had Eddie Long's name tattooed on his wrist. You know, even though Eddie Long never flatly denied the allegations, he did make several highly emotive, impassioned and spiritually manipulative speeches like this one that he made at his church. I've made a few cuts just to condense, but I haven't changed the content.
When I was being condemned from the four corners of the earth, I had a moment. Where I wanted to kill myself. There are folk here who know what I mean, that they didn't give you a sermon, they didn't question you, they didn't call you before council, and you didn't judge me. And I think about this scripture, for God so loved the world. Didn't say he so judged the world. And he said, by this you will know that they are my disciples.
Brian Tamaki refuses flatly to talk about any of this. I've tried, but when you're at his church, you have to get past his goons first. He's always surrounded by them, and they'll ask you what your question is before you can get to him. You're vetted, essentially. Same with phone calls and appointments. You know, regular plebs like me didn't get to ask him questions. This picture here actually shows the grand welcome that Destiny Church put on for Eddie Long when he arrived for their conference back in 2016. It was a porphyry at the airport, as if for some foreign head of state. Again, this is after his victims had spoken out, after it was all made public, and after these victims had even written a book about their abuse and explained how he'd been doing this for years to multiple boys. So, Freedom and Rights Coalition, Destiny Church, Brian and Hannah Tamaki, you may consider that you haven't replied to me, but I personally feel as if I've received a very loud reply. To be honest, you know, if they'd all come out explaining away my comments, that would have been great. Heck, make me look like the bad guy, I really don't mind. But they didn't. They said nothing. Why do they refuse flatly to talk about these things? I'm not waiting here to accuse. I don't want to be saying these things, actually. I don't even like being in this position. But to be honest, because the doors came down that solidly and quickly, I'd gone from being a bit concerned to being genuinely frightened about what might be going on behind those doors. Just like we know with our government, and as you've said yourself, Brian Tamaki, people don't usually do that unless they're hiding something. You've always been happy to talk to the media about anything. Oh, hang on, there was that one time about the tax evasion. You declined that one. But I remember you talking about how you loved the chance to talk on TV about anything. You know, you even went on and talked about your covenant ring ceremony on TV3, I think it was. Even you weren't shy of that one, even though you knew people thought that was pretty out there. I remember you saying at church how all publicity is good publicity and you welcome it all, and everyone would clap and cheer when you did. To me personally, the only appropriate response to the Eddie Long revelations would have been to renounce him and sever relationships with New Birth Ministries, at least till he was cleared, you know, and there was some evidence of some kind. But you didn't. Not at all. You kept receiving their favours. Why didn't you speak about it in church to all those that had sat under this man's teaching for so many hours and so many days? I mean, during the Decade of Destiny conference, for days he was on the stage condemning homosexuality and espousing sexual purity within and outside of marriage. And then he would retire to his hotel room with his 17-year-old boyfriend immediately after. And he was a married man. So I mean, once it came out, why didn't you put out the call to the church just to check and ask, you know, all those that had spent time with him unsupervised? Because he was roaming free for many days, mingling with lots of young people. Why didn't you check if anyone else had, you know, been harmed or if connections had been made? That was actually a fiduciary duty. Failure to perform your fiduciary duty is actually considered a crime. You just invited him back. I mean, that's actually all you did, really, isn't it? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think you ever spoke about it at all. And on his next visit, did you check that every time he was alone with a young person that he left the door open? Did you let parents know, more importantly, of his pattern of molesting kids in his church? His pattern of making connections and, you know, texting and starting a relationship and then basically culminating into flying them places for private holidays alone with him? No. As far as I know, you said nothing. You post things like your, you know, Peppa Pig Facebook post about how you disapprove of homosexuality and that you hate paedophilia and that you stand for family values. I could just about hear you though from here, you know, saying, look, it's none of my business, which, you know, how you spend your money and what you're into is not my business. I can't argue with that, and that's why I've never really said anything before. But protecting children is not only my business, but it's actually the business of every sound-minded adult in New Zealand. And part of that is to not sweep rat poo under the rug, but to acknowledge it and to check it out, you know, and as much as we may not want to, acknowledge that perhaps we might have a rat problem. Look, I just feel like I am recognizing this culture that I'm seeing here, you know, absolute silence from the top, absolute silencing of those underneath, absolute reverence and obedience to a man, and the subsequent removal of accountability and the potential enabling for that man. You know, I'd rather be wrong in my decision to look at this. You know, I'd rather be wrong, but at least have looked, than be right and have looked the other way. So, anyway, my questions still stand from my last video, and if Brian Tamaki or Hannah Tamaki or the Freedom and Rights Coalition or even a spokesperson is willing to answer them, that would be great. Okay, number one, I'll just recap them for you. Number one, why did you keep inviting this guy back into your church after the revelations about him became public? Let's face it, he'd still be a regular in your church if he hadn't died just a few months after his last visit. Number two, why did you call for a snap election when freedom minor parties pleaded with you not to? And you knew that it would hand over the governance of our nation to Luxon. And why is mainstream media reporting that you're doing the same thing again now? Number three, I'd like a comment from you. Okay, this is not just coming from me. There's many people, actually, that are interested to know what your thoughts are about this. Just about why you were completely absent from the Fire and Fury documentary. And please don't tell me to just go and ask Paula Penfold and her producers, because, you know, she's not going to tell me. Number four, why did you tell us to go home on the first day of the Parliament occupation, you know, on the first day of the Freedom Convoy? It raised a few eyebrows because it's not what you said was going to happen. Number 5, why were you absent from the first standoff when our children and our elderly folk were being trampled, brutally assaulted by the New Zealand police? We could have used a few of you big burly fellas then. And where were you at the last standoff too, on that final day? Absent again. Number 6, what's your perspective on why the government house protest, which was Non-Freedom and Rights Coalition, resulted in peaceful protesters being quickly and violently arrested and removed, and the Three Waters Bridge protest, again Non-Freedom and Rights Coalition, also resulted in the peaceful protesters being quickly, violently arrested and removed? Yet your protests, take your bridge protest for example, it was supported by the New Zealand police. They sent you a team and vehicles, even providing you with a nice slow police escort across the bridge so as not to rush you. Okay, I'll end with a quote from Brian Tamaki. Where are the media? Why aren't they asking the questions that should be asked? Where's the transparency? Well, I'm right here. I'm asking some questions that a lot of people would like to know some answers to. But you appear to be doing the same thing that Jacinda did at the last protest/political rally, when she again refused to give any answers and also screened the windows of the beehive. That was a picture that said 1,000 words, wasn't it? It wasn't a good look. Okay, well, I may be in for another pummeling, but as I said in my last video, this isn't about me. This is about the people of New Zealand. It's about the truth. And yeah, so, okay. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll keep you posted with any updates or communication or the lack thereof. But until then, thanks again, and we'll see you next time. Bye.